Hey everyone, it's Steph. Welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, well, welcome. We're happy to have you at Ink and Page. Here's what's happening. Today I'm wrapping up my books for the month of October. We're like halfway through November, but it's fine, no big deal. I'm going to be describing these books to you while I have my lunch cooking on the stove. So I'm going to see if I can get through this before my soup is done. Let's get started. So the month of October kicked off with a reread of one of my faves. This is Friends and Foes. I've reread this multiple times and it just puts my heart in a happy place. So that's what I kicked off the month with. And then of course, I know this will not shock you, my month of reading was primarily historical romance, Regency romance, mixed in with a bit of spooky reads. So I decided to try a few new things for the month of October. First one that was a little bit more spooky that I read is The Turn of the Key by Ruth Ware. I've not read anything by this author before, so I listened to this on audio. And this takes place in a home that is looking for a new nanny. There has been some mysterious things happen in the past. This home is also owned by two parents who are very techie. They have all these modern gadgets in their home. Basically everything, what? You don't have permission to do that. Everything that is in the home is very techie, can be controlled. The lights, there are cameras in every room, everything is watched. So this new nanny gets left with these several kids and she is to watch them. There are things that come up, a mystery, thrillery kind of things. But overall, I enjoyed this book. I didn't love it as much as I wanted to. I had seen it really hyped up, so I was like going into this thinking I was going to be like thrilled by it, and it didn't really do that much for me. It was fine, it was okay. I don't know if I want to read anymore by this author, so if you love this author, definitely let me know in the comments if I should give another book a try. Next book I read was To Steal a Heart by Jen Turano. This book just came out in early November of 2020, and it is a really great story and a lot of moments make me laugh when I'm reading her books. In Jen Turano's typical humor and fashion, they just make light of things and they're very silly while still having content that feels very real and very heartwarming, and characters that have this great growth and a lot of quirky background characters to kind of round out this cast. So this one-eyed dog just, you know, hit my heart in a special place because I have a one-eyed dog. And in this story, this one-eyed dog only responds when someone talks to it like a pirate, which is of course just something silly and goofy that Jen Turano would create for her stories, and just makes the story so funny and humorous, and the way the story is designed and the way the dialogue is clever and witty, and just the banter between the two main characters who were friends as children and they got separated, and now there's a significant difference in social class between the two. Seeing the disparity between those and the way they are raised, how that has led them to very different paths in life, and when their paths cross again very early on in the book, what does that mean for their future? And they're solving a bit of a mystery and figuring some things out together, so that's really fun to follow along with and definitely something I enjoyed. Next up, I read the final 3 books in a series by a new to me author. I read the first 2 books of hers in September. The first book is called Rescuing Miss Inglewood, I think it is, by Sally Britton. Read the first 2 in September, read the final 3 in October, and I really enjoyed these books. This was a group of friends who all grew up together in the country, the English countryside, Regency era, and seeing how each of their stories plays out. Book 3, so good. Saving Miss Everly. This story allowed you to see a totally different storyline for a Regency romance. We had this girl, Hope, traveling from England to Jamaica. There ends up being a shipwreck. She gets washed up on this island and she needs to figure out where to go from here. She ends up stumbling across someone else who's been trapped on the island for a year, and she, along with other people from her ship, are trying to survive and trying to think of a way to get off this island, knowing that this young man, Alejandro, has been trapped there for a while and not knowing what that future looks like for them. It's just very interesting to see how this plays out. It's a very unique, original idea, and the ending was so good. So definitely something to check out. The 4th book is about Isaac. He's another one who grew up with this crew of these 5 friends, and he ends up losing an arm during the war. So when he comes back home from the Napoleonic Wars, he is figuring out how to maintain the estate while being a gentleman who's supposed to be prim and proper and dance and ride a horse, and how does he do these things with one arm? So we see that he's kind of getting acclimated to that a little bit, but he's still very sensitive about those topics, understandably so, and we see how this girl ends up coming to his life and how that changes his viewpoint on himself and how he fits into society, expectations of society versus what you want for yourself, finding a measure of peace and satisfaction in embracing who you are, and finding someone who can love and accept you for who you are. Great themes. I really enjoyed this book. Then the fifth one was about Lord Neil. Neil is a member of this whole crew, but not quite a friend of this group. See a different side of him when he is kind of played an antagonist in some of the earlier novels in this series, to kind of see him become a protagonist and what kind of transformation he's going through, as he is a very rich, kind of snobbity, uppity up kind of guy, and he ends up kind of being kicked out of the house and having to fend for himself financially. He stumbles across a poor widow and her mother and her daughter, and the three of them are living together in this small cottage. He helps them around the cottage and the lands so that he can find a place to live and sustain himself while waiting to come back into his father's good graces. What tumbles along from there is a lot of growth, really sweet romance, and I just really liked the overall transformation of his character. The main female character in this story brings out a different side in him. She can recognize that what his past does not define who he is now. And just great themes, really great writing. I'm definitely going to read more by Sally Britton because I really enjoyed her writing and definitely wanted to check more of her stuff out. What else? Okay, so I picked up the first book in the Truly Devious series, part of the mystery, October-y kind of feel. This takes place in the past and the present, and it goes back and forth between the two. It takes place at this Vermont school. I was really interested in the mystery from the past. That was like early 1900s. The present mystery I didn't feel as invested in, but I really wanted to know what happened to that mystery from the past. It was really interesting and kind of creative kind of setup. The way it was executed, I didn't love the ending. It was definitely a cliffhanger, and I don't feel any desire to really continue with the series at this point. Maybe I'll change later. I don't know. Should I just keep going and give this a chance for the second and the third books? Just to find out what happens, maybe? I don't know. I didn't feel that thrill and excitement of what's coming next as much, especially as we went on through the book. It just kind of lagged for me, and it felt like we weren't getting where we were going. Felt like we should have had some conclusion, even if we didn't have a total conclusion for the series. I would have liked to see some sort of resolution at the end of this book, and I didn't get that. So I didn't hate it. I thought it was a good book. Everybody seems to be raving about it, and I'm like, what am I missing? So if you've read this series, let me know in the comments if the second and third book kind of pick up in pace or the mystery, because I've heard great things. I'm just not sure if I want to give the other two a chance right now, so we'll see. Ooh, another Regency romance. Vying for the Viscount was so good. The scene where these two meet is hilarious, and she thinks he's like this stranger or this thief, and it ends up being a really great story. We have this main female character who is on the brink of spinsterhood, almost. She has been helping out her neighbor's estate that has a stable full of horses. She's good friends with the stable master. The owner has passed away. They are getting a new owner who has not come to the estate yet. She helps care for the horses. That's her main love, is horses, and she wants to work with them in whatever capacity she can. And then we have our gentleman. He's an English gentleman raised entirely in India. So when he gets the summons that the estate has been passed on to him, he travels to England, and just all the adjustments culturally with the food. He thinks the food is very bland compared to the spices and the rich meals in India. He also has trouble adjusting to the temperature, which I never really thought of, but he always thinks it's cold all the time. Things of that nature. He's going to society and he doesn't know anyone. His parents have already passed, and his grandfather, there's no one else in society to introduce him, so he's really kind of walking in blind. He ends up kind of helping him get adjusted to society. I really enjoyed the development of this story. The side characters are really great. I really want to read the sequel. So I really enjoyed this story, and I really want to read book 2. I've been wanting to read this for a while, and I've liked Christine Hunter's other books, so I really wanted to see where this went, and I'm so glad that I finally got a chance to read this, and I definitely can't wait for book 2. So definitely check out if you're into horses or Regency romance or multicultural kind of romance, because even though he's English, he definitely brings a lot of things from Indian culture into his clothing style and things of that nature, which I thought was really fun and made this a little different than some of the other Regency romances I've read. So yeah, I should go check on my soup. Okay, we are more than halfway through my list, so that's good. So let's keep going. Let's see. For October, I decided to give this a chance because I have seen this talked about and it was available for my library, so I was just like, sure, let's go. Shirley Jackson, author of The Lottery, which is what I'm most familiar with from her. She wrote We've Always Lived in the Castle. It's a short audiobook. I want to say it was like 4 or 5 hours. It really wasn't long. This is not my typical style genre. It was one of those, once I finished it, I felt like I hadn't fully grasped all the themes that Jackson was trying to touch on. So I ended up doing a little bit of research, and it really broadened my understanding of the cultural and historical influences on this story. Overall, it's a story about these two sisters. They live with their uncle. Something mysterious happened in the past. The rest of their family members are deceased. A mysterious cousin comes to try to acquire some of their family fortune. We see what kind of issues arise from there. Again, it's a short book. It doesn't have a whole lengthy plot, and it leaves a lot to kind of a vague, unclear, unfocused picture. Leaves more room to interpretation. I think that's the reason some people really love this story. I didn't love it, but I can appreciate what Jackson did, and I can appreciate her writing style even if it's not my favorite. So overall, I'm glad I read it. Don't think I need to read it again, but glad I checked this out. Next up, I read another arc, A Castaway in Cornwall. This is coming out in early 2021. This is by Julie Klassen. She wrote this story about this girl. She lives with her uncle, who has since remarried and has a daughter of their own. So she's kind of the outcast. She ends up helping her uncle, who's a vicar. She cares for things around the community and helps out where she can. One day, we have a shipwreck on Cornwall. She ends up finding a man who is still alive and taking him back to her home and caring for him. There's some discoveries about her past as well as his past. They end up traveling together to reduce this threat that's ongoing within their society and seeing how that develops the growth of both of them as characters as well as the blossoming bromance between them. Overall, I thought this was an interesting story. The pacing seemed a little bit slow for my liking at times, but I really liked the overall plot. I thought it was a good conclusion. It brought in some really interesting viewpoints during the Napoleonic War times, so we see a little bit of English versus French culture and seeing how that kind of comes together and how we can find kind of a happy medium. So I read Death Comes to Pemberley. For as much as I love Austen, I wasn't sure if I wanted to read this. It sounded kind of morose. It wasn't at all. It felt like Agatha Christie meets Jane Austen. So I really enjoyed that perspective on things, and I really enjoyed getting to see what these characters might look like. I give the author a lot of props for her writing style as a nod to Austen. P.D. James even says in the preface of the story, I know Jane Austen could have done this better than I could, but here goes nothing. So she's very much upfront and says this is a story based off of Austen's Pride and Prejudice and where these characters are 6 years later. So I enjoyed seeing Lizzie at Pemberley, what Jane and Bingley look like as an established couple, and with children, the Bennets at Pemberley's, and what is it like for, you know, the interaction between the siblings. So I really enjoyed the story. It has that murder mystery effect with this murder that takes place on Pemberley's estate. And of course, Darcy and Elizabeth feel responsible for taking care of the situation because it's on their property. And we see Lydia and Wickham and see what kind of drama they bring into the mix. Glad I read it, and I enjoyed the writing style a lot for this one. Definitely felt reminiscent of Austen's style of writing. Next up, I read Rebecca. So I read this because of the new Netflix adaptation that was coming out, and I wanted to read it before I watched the film adaptation, so that was interesting. There have been so much said about this book that I don't want to sound redundant, but my overall thoughts. The writing was beautiful, if not a little fluffy at times. We kind of lose the plot for a little bit and then get back to the plot. I appreciated the interesting storytelling that the author wrote. The way she wove sentences together was almost artistic in the way that she wrote. It was really beautiful. The movie, in the end, takes a little bit more license, so adds a little bit more on from where the book ends. I still think the book is better than the movie. I'll just leave it at that. Overall, glad I read this. Not what I thought it was going to be, but I'm glad I checked this out. It was a journey. There things happened, and I was like, whoa. And I liked hearing the protagonist's point of view throughout the story and hearing her thoughts. I felt that was missing a little bit when we watched the movie. The doubting thoughts that she has running through her mind as she is aware that she is stepping into a home with her new husband while this husband has already lost his first wife and being compared constantly. We hear more of her thoughts and more of her concerns and more of her self-doubt. Take that for what it's worth. Last Halloween read I read was Coraline. I read this as an audiobook. I didn't know what to expect. I just knew that this was like a popular book and a movie, and whew, for a children's book, this got like a little dark, but it was well done. It took a little while for me to feel like I was really into the plot. It was a really creative idea, and this this world that is a mirror image of the current world. The overall themes were really interesting, and it wasn't my favorite book ever. It's not really my typical style book, but I was glad I gave it a go, and it fit in with the Halloween theme, and I wouldn't think that young children would be like super into this. I would think at least like maybe late elementary or middle grades to not get like too spooked out about this book. Plot was really well done, and yeah, now I got to check this book out. Oh, this is the camera. Great, so hopefully that's not distracting you the entire time. Oh, now the camera is gonna bother me. So, not like Tom Hanks, just kidding, not like the movies. Follow-up to Waiting for Tom Hanks was an interesting kind of look at the two characters that you know were just falling for each other and driving each other crazy in the background of the first story. So I was glad to finally get to read their story. This had a bit more steam than I expected based off of the writing of the first book. If we can look beyond that, the plot was really interesting. The vulnerability issues of trust with our main female character, I enjoyed exploring that. I kind of wish we heard a little bit more from the male lead in terms of like his thought process. He's such a silent and stoic kind of guy. Just a little bit sadder than the first one. Our main female character has a father who has Alzheimer's. That for me hit kind of home because I have a family member who's had that for a few years. A lot of what she was going through is something I'm very used to having discussions about in my family. So, not as enjoyable for me as the first book, but I'm glad I got to read their story. It really was like, these two gotta get together. They're so cute. They definitely have a thing for each other, and seeing how that kind of all funnels out and how that puzzle funnels out. Is that even a thing? Seeing how their romance, how that comes to a conclusion. Definitely like the first one a little bit better than the second, but still glad that I gave this one a go. Got to see how this concluded. I think it's time for me to get my soup. Let me wrap this up. Alright, so now that my soup is ready, I am going to wrap up this video so that I can eat my lunch. So thanks so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and I look forward to seeing you guys next time. Have a great day!